Hello everybody, welcome back to another podcast. So last weekend we have Frozen 2, 21 Bridges, and A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. Let's see how those movies did at the box office. Alright, so coming in at number 1 is Frozen 2 as expected. This movie opened to 130 million over the weekend. This is a movie that I said could probably open somewhere in the 95 million range. I said it could probably open higher, but I picked 95 because it's a good solid number. The first film opened to about like 67 million or so. It went on to make 400 million domestically and 1.2 billion worldwide. And as you can see, this movie, made a little bit over double that to what the first movie opened to. And my 95 million figure is actually pretty conservative. Reviews-wise, Frozen 2 is not as well reviewed as the first movie. The first movie had 90% on the tomato meter, and for the sequel, it's actually 76%. But we can expect the movie to dip a bit. Let's see how it did overseas. Overseas, it pulled in 228 million for a worldwide total of 358 million. So as you can see, this movie is going to probably outgross the first movie by quite a bit. Frozen 2's opening actually broke some record in November, so it is on the record as the highest animated movie opening for an animated movie in November, and it's the third best opening for an animated film behind The Incredibles 2, 182 million, and Finding Dory's 135. So all-time record third opening animated movie and record opening for an animated film in November. So that's pretty good for Frozen 2. Alright, let's move on to number 2, which is the last number 1 movie from the previous weeks, and that is Ford versus Ferrari. This movie in the second weekend dropped about 50% to pull in 15.7 million. Domestic gross is 75.7 million, and let's see how it did overseas. Overseas, it pulled in for about 47 million for a worldwide total of 104 million. The budget for this movie is about 100 million. So it still has some ways to go to make up the $100 million budget. Reviews-wise, this movie is pretty well reviewed, 92% on the tomato meter and an A+ cinema score. So we just have to keep an eye on the overseas market. Alright, number 3 is one of the new releases last weekend, and that is the Mr. Rogers biopic, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, starring Tom Hanks. This movie pulled in about 13.3 million in its opening weekend, which is a decent opening, I guess, depending on the budget for the movie. Reviews-wise, it's actually pretty good, and 96% on the tomato meter and an A cinema score. I said this movie could probably open somewhere in the 10 million range, and it did a little bit better than that because, as compared to, the other biopic that Tom Hanks starred in, Saving Mr. Banks back in 2013, that movie had a 10 million opening, and I said this movie is similar, except that maybe Mr. Rogers, had a more name recognition, than a Walt Disney biopic. Even though Disney is actually well known, but I guess for the target audience, Mr. Rogers is more of a the face. They see him on TV every day. They know who he is. Whereas Walt Disney, it's like way back when, and you could see his products, I guess. But you don't see his face, so that's why I say that Mr. Rogers biopic might have a bigger draw, but similar opening, and it's about right there. Alright, moving along to number 4 is the other new releases last weekend, and that is the action thriller 21 Bridges, starring Chadwick Boseman, who plays Black Panther, by the way. This movie opened to about 9.3 million in its opening weekend, and I said this movie could probably open to 15 to 20 million. I was way off. I thought the African American audience would turn out for this movie, and it's action thriller, and that Bossman's name could probably draw them in, but apparently not. 9.3 million opening is sort of a disappointment. Alright, let's move on to number 5, and that is the World War II movie Midway. In its third weekend, the movie dropped about 45% to pull in about 4.6 million. Domestic gross is about 43 million, and let's see how it did overseas. Overseas, it pulled in about 47 million for a worldwide total of 89 million. And it looks like Midway is falling fast at the domestic market here. But like I said, Midway is more of an American story, right? American war movie. So I don't know how popular this war movie will play overseas. But the budget is low. It's only 60 million to make, but a worldwide total about 90 million is still not doing it. Like I said, we'll see how much more it can squeeze from the overseas market. All right, number 6 is the comedy Playing with Fire starring John Cena. In its third weekend, it pulled in about 4.5 million, drop off about 46% from the previous weekend. Domestic gross is about 32 million. Let's see, overseas, pulled in about 5 million for a worldwide total of about 36 million. And I don't expect this movie to do that well overseas, because it's a comedy and all. So with a domestic gross of about 32 million so far, Playing with Fire is sort of a kind of like a blip at the box office. It did okay. I mean, depending on the budget, right? I don't think this movie costs that much to make. Maybe somewhere in the 15 to 20 million range, maybe a bit more. But I don't think it costs that much. And as we can see, John Cena is not Dwayne Johnson. All right, moving along to number 7 is The Good Liar. It's a thriller starring Helen Mirren and Ian McKellen in the second weekend. This movie put in about 3.4 million, drop off about 39% from the previous week. Domestic gross is about 12 million so far. And it pulled in an additional 5.7 million for a worldwide total of about 17 million. And so this movie is not holding on as well as I expect this movie to do, since it stars 2 master actors. And Helen Mirren movies are always dependable. They usually linger in theaters for a while, and before you know it, it pulled in about between 30 to 50 million or so. And this movie looks like it might be on the lower end of that. All right, let's move on to number 8, which is Charlie's Angels. This movie is bombing hard. So in the second weekend, it dropped about 61% to pull in about 3.2 million. This movie didn't open well. I thought this movie could open better, maybe in the 25 to 30 million range, because the previous 2 Charlie Angels movies opened well. But this movie only opened to 8.6 million, and it dropped even further, 61%. To pull in 3.2 million in the second weekend. So audience just rejected this movie, and a big reason of that is probably because Kristen Stewart is not that huge of a draw, nor is Naomi Scott and Ella Bansky. Elizabeth Banks directed this one, but I guess this goes beyond the brand. I guess that I think the brand is strong. It's just that maybe they just don't want to see these 3 actress in the title roles, and with a box office performance like this, even the female audience is rejecting this movie. All right, number 9 is the rom-com Last Christmas, starring Emilia Clarke and Henry Golding. It pulled in about 3.1 million in its third weekend, drop off about 52% from the previous weekend. Domestic gross is about 28 million, and let's see how it did overseas. Overseas, it actually did pretty well, about 24.5 million for a worldwide total about 52 million. So Last Christmas is actually doing pretty decent. All right, let's close out the top 10 with Joker. This movie already crossed the 1 billion mark, but in its 8th weekend, it put in an additional 2.8 million for domestic gross of 227 million. And let's see how it did overseas. Overseas, it's 710 million for worldwide total of 1 billion. So Joker is, one of Warner Brothers' most profitable superhero movies. Go figure. And it is its cheapest in the modern era as well, with a budget of 55 million. And of note, have to cover Terminator Dark Fate, the latest Terminator movie. And in its 4th weekend, it only pulled in about 1.3 million, drop off of about 71% for a domestic gross of about 60 million. And overseas, did way better overseas, 189 million for a worldwide total of 248 million. But the movie costs 180 plus million to make, so it's still a money loser for the producers of this movie. Alright, so that's it for the box office top 10. Let's move on to the new releases this weekend. The major releases are going to be on the Wednesday, since we have Thanksgiving holiday, right? So it's going to be like a 5-day, weekend. So we have the dramedy Nights Out, and then Queen and Slim. Let's start off with Nights Out. It's probably going to be the bigger movie of the 2. As I say, both of these movies are going to be out on Wednesday. Right now, it's very well reviewed at 96% on the tomato meter. It's directed by Rian Johnson, who directed The Last Jedi and The Looper. It's a hodgepodge of who's who in Hollywood. It's a star-studded cast. Daniel Craig, Chris Evans, Ana de Armas, Jamie Lee Curtis, Michael Shannon, Don Johnson, Toni Collette, Christopher Plummer, Frank Oz, and on and on and on. Craig plays a detective investigating the death of, the patriarch of a, quirky family. And this movie is filled with twists and turns. Again, like I said, it's 96% on the tomato meter, so it's well reviewed. But this movie is opening on the Thanksgiving holiday, so yeah, I don't think Thanksgiving holiday is a big movie night. I don't think. And if it is, they're probably gonna check out some of the more high-profile movies like Frozen 2. But movies like this might have some fans, but I don't think it's gonna be that huge of a movie. So I think the 3-day weekend number for Nights Out is probably somewhere in the 10 to 15 million range, probably at the lower end of that. And for 5 days, it's probably around 20 million. Like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if it opened lower because, Thanksgiving holiday, it's time for family, and this movie might get lost among the more high profile releases. All right, let's move on to Queen and Slim. It is an action thriller, about black couple who killed a police officer accidentally while on their date, and they have to go on the run. You can see that they try to paint this as the, black Bonnie and Clyde, right? But, it stars Daniel Kaluuya and Jodie Turner-Smith making her debut. Chloe Sevigny is here. This movie is surprisingly well reviewed thus far, 87% on the tomato meter. But the problem with Queen Slim is that it doesn't star anybody that you might know of. Kaluuya was in the horror movie Get Out back in 2017, but beyond that, he's probably not that well known. So again, this movie is lacking in star power. But who knows, this movie could surprise us. Unfortunately, it's opening on a crowded Thanksgiving holiday weekend, with Black Friday and all, the eating, the food. So I think this movie is probably going to get lost in the shuffle. So I probably expect this movie to have a 3-day opening of about 5 million or so, 8 million for 5 days. All right, so that's it for this podcast. Let's tune in next time to see how it did. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.